So I'm going to talk to you today about the future of modules in JavaScript and Node. There are some animated GIFs in this. They're not particularly flashy, and if you know me at all, if you've made the mistake of following me on social media, you can probably guess what they show. As introduced, CTO of NPM, which is an obscure company that you probably have never heard of before. I make all the JavaScript flow. You, and I mean you, use a lot of modular JavaScript. Billions and billions of packages, literally. On a Tuesday, over 1 billion packages will get installed by people using NPM to do whatever it is that they do. Writing servers, running front-end applications, building Electron apps, running their test services. You use a lot of modular JavaScript. The shared code ecosystem that you're a part of is unique, I think, for all the programming languages out there. Other programming languages have modular ecosystems. They have shared code, but nobody has it on the scale that you do. And nobody uses it at the scale you do. The JavaScript shared code ecosystem is larger than anything that came before it, both in sheer number of modules there are and in how much you use them. 800,000 modules on NPM probably at this point, or close to it. There'll be 800,000 modules soon. You use this essentially thoughtlessly. You just type npm install, you spin your kitchen tap, and then JavaScript pours out. You don't even think about it, right? You're kind of a little outraged if something goes wrong and you don't have it. If you're using, our client, you've got a cache, you won't even notice the registry is down. This is great, actually. Raise your hand if you use code from npm. Yeah. You use code from npm. So the topic I'm about to talk about here matters to you because you use npm and you use modular JavaScript. Everyone in this room needs to care about this at least a little bit. So what's up with the future? Like, why do I say that the future of modules in JavaScript is interesting? Why not just carry on? It seems to be working pretty well, right? Well, not quite. JavaScript, the language, has a new official module standard to go with its de facto standard, the one you've been using all along. You probably didn't realize this, but what Node offers you is not actually a standard of the language. It's the thing that Node did. Let's back up a little bit, define some terms, and look at what we're talking about. What's a module? Jargon. Module is a scope, a name and a little bundle around it, and then an API that lets you reuse it. That's it. That's what the module standard is. Allows you to express what it is that you're sharing and what it is that you're reusing from somewhere else. So in this very important illustration, the module spec is the Lego nubs. It's like how big they are and how far apart they are. It is just enough of a standard that you can safely express what you're sharing and what you're reusing, and no more. Smallest module there is a file. And then you can take clumps of files and put them together and have them reuse what's in each other, and you have a bigger thing that you might think of as a module. Give that group of files a package JSON, and you have, whoa, a package. Now, a package is a Node concept. It's specific to Node. It's nothing, the language itself doesn't have this as part of it, as is the package JSON. These are things that Node invented for itself to solve a problem that it had. It's not part of any language standard. Require is the same thing. Node invented this. Well, actually, CommonJS invented this. It's not part of the language. So right now we're talking about two different module specs. CommonJS, sometimes abbreviated CJS, which are my initials, so I'm a huge fan of that. And then ECMAScript modules, which you'll sometimes heard referred to as ESM or ES modules. If I use that jargon in this talk, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so you've seen the syntax a million times. Here's a really super fast refresher. You can type, oh yeah, require chalk. And then in ESM, it's import chalk, woo. And then, look at that, you can just use stuff. Look at all that modern JavaScript. Here's some more modern JavaScript, ooh. Module exports equals blah, blah, blah. That's always confusing people. Export, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, actually, that's not what this talk is about. Because you can get this pretty much anywhere. You've probably seen it before. And the syntax is not the hard part. It's because the transition from one module system to another has not been smooth. And, yeah, it's been not good. This is how I feel about it at this point. It's been years, literally, and Node still doesn't have support for ESM in any really usable way. But the problem is that Node needs both. JavaScript now has a module standard. Node needs to use it. Doesn't do ESM natively yet. So, what the heck? How did we get here? We've got one module system in Node now. We're going to have another one in the future. And the in-between, which is where we are right now, is kind of a mess. So let's back up again a little bit further from jargon to how we got here. Because in order to understand where we're going to go in the future, we need to know our past. Because otherwise we're going to repeat it, and that's just awful. Right? In 2009, let's go back 9 years. 2009, about when Node got its start as a wacky little way to write HTTP servers in JavaScript. JavaScript had no official module spec back then. But it was beginning to figure out that it needed one, because people wanted to reuse code. There was a lot of server-side JavaScript going on at that time. Node is sort of the only survivor of this period, but there was a whole lot going on. Ringo.js, Narwhal are two names you might remember if you've been in the industry for a while. But we've only got one left. CommonJS was a server-side spec that a bunch of those people pulled together themselves under a couple of names to pull together some server-side patterns and reach some kind of standards which the language didn't have, but which server-side JavaScript needed. There's a pretty good Wikipedia article on this if you want to read up about the history here. So Node didn't actually want to invent much stuff. The people who ran Node are smart people. When you use a standard, you use a standard. So they took the CommonJS syntax and they wrote a loader. Important word, loader. Loaders, it turns out, are crucial. Hold that concept. Like, put that one in your pocket, because we're going to come back to loaders later in this talk. If you were using browsers at the time, require.js would be the loader for AMD. I don't know if any of you remember all those words, because I don't think that people use them anymore. But Node has this way of giving a module specifier, a human-friendly module name like chalk, and it turns that into a file somewhere in your file system, loads it, parses it, and makes it available for use so that the JavaScript can run. And this resolution algorithm is really part of Node's magic. The language didn't provide it, Node provided it. It's part of this thing that happened as Node and NPM were written together by essentially the same people. So here, we're requiring chalk, right? How does that turn into a file path? That's the resolution algorithm that's part of the loader. It goes into Node modules, it goes into chalk, it looks for a package JSON, it reads some stuff from the package JSON, figures out where the entry point is, loads index.js, and boom, away you go. Even caches it so you don't have to do all that work twice. But if you use a file path, /chalk, that resolves to a different file. This is, again, you actually probably use this thoughtlessly. You type this stuff and you don't even think about it, right? Because it's just, you've internalized how the Node loader works. Node's take on modules has been pretty freaking useful. It's useful enough that you use the heck out of it. It's one of those proofs, like if it wasn't useful, you wouldn't be using it. Why are you using it? Okay, it's good enough for what it's doing. It may not be perfect. People who wrote that loader, but work on it now, can tell you where it isn't perfect and where they feel they've made mistakes, but it's good enough. Back in 2009, when this started moving, Browser.js was sort of in a different place. You had AMD, the asynchronous module definition, I think it stands for, and you had require.js, but mostly you didn't use it. Mostly you were concatenating your JavaScript, which is kind of secretly mostly what you're still doing. The future is always just one step away. So really, I feel Node actually had it better. We could put all these things in separate files so that we could think about them separately and load them separately and then give them names and shove them onto NPM and save them. And we didn't have to think about a build step. Build step kind of happens, but we don't think about it, which is pretty great. But the JavaScript world as a whole knew that, hey, sharing code's a thing. People like doing that, we've got to do it. So TC39, which, as you know, Bob, is the technical steering committee that defines the language, started working on a browser spec at about the same time that Node was doing its thing. And they gave us a spec for import and export in 2015, and you'll note that that's 3 years ago, and 6 years after Node got underway. So they took their time about it, which is good, because otherwise you end up with things like what happens when you do addition in JavaScript. So we like that they take the time about this now. And they've covered a module system, and its design choices are different from the design choices CJS made, which is absolutely fine because it's focused on browser delivery of this module system. Its intended uses are different. It's mostly not dynamic, the way require is dynamic, where you can require a variable name. People often do that. Maybe it's not the best idea, but you do it because you can. If you can do something, I know you people, you will do it. It's really designed to support static analysis. Then it ruins it by adding dynamic import. But mostly, if you're using bare word import, you're making yourself amenable to static analysis. Lynn Clark has an amazing cartoon deep dive. If you Google exactly that, Lynn Clark cartoon deep dive, you will get all the information you want to know about the ESM module system and how it works. Save that. Put that one in your pockets. So, static analysis. Why static analysis? It's important when your target is the browser. Care about this. Node's nested dependencies were part of Node's brilliance. It's why Node projects don't have dependency hell. You don't have to pick which single version of a package you're going to use, because the answer is, yeah, using them all. If you've got one dependency that needs Lodash version 1 and you're using Lodash version 3, it's fine. Stick them both on the file system. The extra copy of Lodash is only a 1K on disk. Who cares? But when you're on the browser, oh my God, that extra copy of Lodash is an entire extra K, and we're on mobile, and we don't want to do that. We're trying to minimize our bundle size. So static analysis is a huge boon to you if you're doing front-end development, which almost all of you are. Yeah, 1K. Who wants that? No, developers kind of still don't care. I mean, you can give them tree shaking, but they're like, why a build step? But here's the thing, it doesn't matter that Node developers don't care, because in between that 2009 when server-side JavaScript started being a thing and now, we had a thing happen. Node's user base changed. I'm a throwback. I write server-side JavaScript when I'm lucky enough to get to write code at all anymore. I write it in the server. I write CLI apps, I write little modules, I write little back-end services that help bring you the JavaScript. I don't do front-end development. But NPM's users do front-end development. Almost all of you do front-end development. Almost exclusively. Maybe you'll do a little server-side stuff because you want to do server-side rendering. But the user base has changed. Here's another thing that happened. Y'all wanted future JavaScript now. look at all these delectable language features and you can't use them because your browser targets don't use them. Well, guess what? You had a way to use them. Babel, which, how many of you are using Babel? Yeah, that's a lot of people, because it gives you this really great way to not care what your browser target is, right? Because you can write in modern JavaScript and then transpile to the back. And you're probably doing this with ECMAScript modules right now. You're probably writing import and export, and you think that's working. But guess what? I mean, yeah, woo. You're typing this stuff and you think it's doing what the module spec is, but it's not. It's not. The future's not here. Babel transpiles to CommonJS behind the scenes, and it gives you nodes loader behind the scenes, and so CommonJS is still doing all the actual work, and then you end up in this single thing that you download to the browser anyway. Maybe your code splitting this, but nodes loader is still doing important work for you. There are actually effectively 3 module specs right now, just to make things worse. CommonJS, the flavor of ESM that you're using when you write Babel and transpile, and ESM itself, the spec, which recently arrived in browsers. But there's a missing piece in the browser. There's no loader. They're starting to talk about loaders. Google has some proposals for loaders, but there isn't one right now. Well, okay, there is a loader right now, but it's HTML's loader. What's that mean? It means that your includes look like this. HTTPS, example.com, stroke JS, stroke whatever, stroke your hashtag from your randomized bundle to bust cache, stroke chalk, stroke index.js. Now, that's like super predictable. You know exactly what you're loading. It's also kind of freaking annoying, right? If you have to write that every time, suddenly you're looking at another build step. Nodes loader is part of its magic. It's part of the thing that lets you use it thoughtlessly. It takes cognitive burden away from you every time you reuse a piece of JavaScript. There's no magic in the current spec-compliant ESM loading, because there isn't a loader, really. Babel sure makes it look good, so you're kind of fooled. But even worse, Babel sets expectations about how it works. I actually think that's kind of good that Babel sets pretty high expectations about it work. But see, the thing is, we have this illusion that things are working, but they're not really working. We're still doing CommonJS behind the scenes. Now, it's a lot of CommonJS. Actually, I think that number's out of date. I don't know, somebody look at it and tell me what it is. It's a lot of JavaScript on NPM. It's all CommonJS, really. At best, it's Babel ESM. And people are using Node to do front-end development. All right, that's our background here. This is sort of a contention I make. I think this is not tremendously controversial contention. Node should use JavaScript standards where they exist. There was a while when it didn't matter very much, when the 2 ecosystems were essentially separate, when Node's server-side developers were over here and all the front-end developers were over here, and they kind of met in the middle because they were sort of using the same language, but not anymore. We want to make the experience of using JavaScript closer to one JavaScript, where you can write things in one place and run them in the other and not really sweat it too much. So Node should use ESM QED. What does it mean? Why is this a mess? Well, the spec landed in 2015 and we still don't have it, so it's obviously taking a while. It's literally taking years. I was kind of hoping, like, because I'm a Node programmer, not a front-end developer, I was like, oh, can't this just go away? I don't need it on new module system. But eventually I came to realize, yeah, no, we should use standards. The language is going this way, let's go this way. Okay. Then I went to this super depressing talk by Miles Borens, who's the current director of the TSC, the Node Technical Steering Committee. And he just listed all these reasons why the integration was horrible and hard and impossible, and the Node project hadn't made any traction on it. And I was just like, What? Systems have to coexist, but they have nothing in common. Huh. How do they interoperate? Huh. This actually turns out to be pretty tricky. Can you require an ESM file? Can you import a CJS file? Import in the browser is supposed to be asynchronous. Is it asynchronous in Node? What happens if you make it asynchronous in Node? Require asynchronous right now. What happens if you change that expectation that you all have? How do you know from the outside whether a file is using ESM syntax to export, to share? Which API is a file using? They're all named foo.js. How do you do this without parsing everything in advance to try to figure it out? The browser has an advantage here. You can use the type equals module marker when you include something to say, hey, this is ECMAScript module syntax. Use the script, parse goal, parse it this way in strict mode. You get a whole bunch of stuff for free when you do this. Node has nothing like that. Come on, advance. So it turns out, here's another thing that turns out to matter. Parse goal detection, it turns out, is important. Oops. In fact, in my view, this is bracket, siege opinion on bracket. Parse goal detection is the only problem with integrating ESM into Node. The loader, yeah, look, Babel showed us what the loader should do. The loader should just do exactly what Node does, no problem. This, on the other hand, is where all the controversy comes in. You do it by parsing every single file twice. Try parsing it one way. If it fails, parse it the other way. This is, as you can imagine, parsing everything twice has what you would call performance implications. Nobody wants that. The Node project is very performance focused, I think, and that's really awesome because it's one of the reasons why Node stays zippy. So they proposed this thing, the .mjs suffix, as like an unambiguous signal. Hey, there's a module behind here. Everyone called this Michael Jackson script. I don't know if you've called Michael Jackson script, but I call it. What this means is no parsing. You advertise your API in your name. This is like super obvious. There's no ambiguity here. .mjs, you're good. But you know, people had a reaction. I had a reaction to that too. I thought, wow, that's a transitional choice that's going to look really silly in 10 years. So I said, all right, this is me now. I said, what happens when you choose different constraints on the problem? What happens if you take that dial of where you're putting your trade-offs and put it somewhere else? How hard can it be? Well, actually, you know, unlike most things that are follow-ups to that, actually not very hard. Node is really pretty awesome. It's got this really very solid base to implement on. We made some very different choices than Node's experimental modules mode did. No Michael Jackson script, parse the entry points. Like when you type node cli.js, parse that. Provide a command line flag to skip parsing that, and then make the user, KAU, type require when you're using CommonJS and import when you're using ESM. You have to know the API module uses in advance. Now, our aim was to prove that with a tiny bit of parsing, maybe an acceptable performance implication, you could get a lot of usability. Yeah, we're done. Absolutely, that was it, right? Reception was mixed. This is sort of a nice moment for me personally, when Brendan Ike says, this is good about a thing you did. Yeah. JavaScript, but this is what more like what the Node project reaction was. In this GIF, I am Clara and the Node project is the doctor. They were less happy because it turns out that, like, okay, the code is not the hard part. Technical problems are easy. Implementing that was easy. The people problems are hard. The people problems involved in Node right now are such questions as, what is Node for? How do we, as its users, use it? Where is the project going? Whoa, that got meta really fast. But it turns out the answers to this inform where you go when you choose things like what trade-offs should we make when we integrate a new module system into a language platform. Who's using it? What are they going to be using it for? What are their expectations? Does any of these solutions meet the needs of Node's users who now are you? Fundamental differences in the answers to those questions mean fundamental differences in APIs expressed by Node. I like to refer to this as every problem has 3 phases. Sometimes you repeat them, but it's a talking problem, followed by a thinking problem, followed by a typing problem in that order of difficulty from hardest to easiest. I, as a programmer, love moving to typing because that's fun. But most problems start with talking problems, and that's the hard part. The Node modules problem, it turned out, needed more talking. They had been kind of wedged for a while in an impasse. I've got opinions. I can come up with an answer, but does my answer represent what the Node user base needs? Does my answer represent what the project needs? Probably not, as it turns out, otherwise they wouldn't have met me with a broom. So what I actually wanted was not to get our proposal adopted, but get the conversation restarted. I think I've been successful at that. Here's another answer to this question, one that turns the dial all the way to parsing everything. If you use standard things ESM, run npm init ESM -y. Did you know that npm init is a thing? Yeah, npm init is a thing. You can init projects with templates from npm. Are you running npm, the very latest npm? Are you? Nod, yes, CJ, we are. Because it has some goodies, like templated init, which is pretty cool. npm audit and npm audit fix, which is also pretty cool. If you are using dependencies that have known security problems in them, it will tell you about them, and then it will fix most of them for you with one command. Please keep your CLI updated because we are constantly working on it. Also, I'm going to beg you all, please turn on two-factor auth. Especially if you own packages that you publish. Please, thank you. All right, the lecture's over. Back to the lecture. ESM in Node, without a build step, use this ESM module. This is pretty kind of freaking amazing. It's from John Dalton, the dude who wrote Lodash, which is my favorite example of a package. He set the tradeoff dial all the way to maximum parsing for everything. And the tradeoff is an awful lot of convenience and a little bit of a performance hit, those performance implications. Parsing everything gives you transparent interop. With glorious abandon, you can import a CJS file and require an ESM file, and it's all just so nice. You can do it today, and pretty cool, right? Is that the future of ESM and Node? Probably not. I don't think that's where the tradeoff dial is going to end up pointing. This is my opinion here. I'm just guessing. That performance implication is going to bug everybody. They're not going to be happy with that. But it's actually pretty great. I like using it. Where are we? Here's the actual good news. Node has a modules team, modules working group now. It's uncharted, but it exists. And it's been meeting every 2 weeks since January. It's a long time, but consensus takes a long time. And then this group is doing the hard work of talking. They started by writing use cases, which is a phenomenal way to start looking at this problem of like, who are our users? And how are we going to satisfy their needs? What are they trying to do with modules? What are you trying to do with modules anyway? So this is the hard part. The people part, not the technical part. If you want to look in on where the trade-offs are and where all the discussion is, that's the URL. They generate a lot of discussion. I can't keep up with it really, and I read fast, but boy, there's a lot of people there. All of this discussion is really about a few hundred lines of fairly straightforward JavaScript. Tech problems are easy. The Node team will absolutely nail the technical problems of implementing this once they figure out what this is. And warnings, opinions follow. I think when I look at this, I'm sort of an outsider. I'm in the working group because I sort of kicked over the bucket and made a mess. So I thought, oh, all right, I'll come and I'll try to help. Node project is conflicted about whether to privilege the transition or the destination. When you want transparent interop, what you're saying is, I want this transition to be super easy. I want people to not have to think about the fact that they're using two module systems for a while. .mjs is another transition privileging solution because it's saying ESM is weird and new and it's not the default and we're going to be all nervous about it. And then 10 years from now, we're going to have this thing sitting around. Transition costs often stay with you forever if you're not really careful about them because you make technical decisions in 2009 and then suddenly 10 years later, they're like, whoop, still with you. That mistake is still right there with you. MJS, if we pick it, is going to be here 10 years from now. But the project kind of needs to decide how much parsing is it willing to accept and how much inconvenience is it willing to inflict on you all. Like having to know the API of what the package you're using is an inconvenience. You have to think about it. It's a little bit of a cognitive burden for a while. I don't know what the future of modules is. I have a pretty good guess. It's not the 12th Doctor. This is not really another depressing talk about the future of ESM and Node. It kind of sounds depressing because I've just told you all about the mess, but I actually told you about the upside, which is that they're talking about it and they're working on use cases and they're moving it forward. I think the process is going to work. I just am sort of sorry I can't stand up in front of you and say, yes, here it is, we figured it out, it's implemented, do this. But, loader's going to get worked out. I think we're going to land on something close to the node loader, probably fix a few mistakes. Tradeoff, dial for parse goals will get set somewhere. I don't know where. That's where the argument kind of is right now. Future of Node is pretty much front end. It is you, not me. I'm a niche user of Node now. That's kind of funky. And the future is using common standards. Common standards are how people agree, they are how people share code, they are how code works together. It's the right choice. Learn the syntax now if you haven't. Find that Lynn Clark article, read it, it's not hard. It's probably easier than CommonJS's syntax was. Future you is going to assume ESM and not CJS. CJS will be the past. If you're using Babel, go ahead, use it. You might have to change some things in a while when it really lands and you're not using CommonJS behind the scenes anymore. It's all right, it's close enough. Don't bet on transparent interop. Bracket opinion, close bracket opinion is my bet, is that we can't get it. It's too costly 10 years from now. I might be wrong. Node might give us transparent interop. Somebody might come with a really brilliant idea. JDD in his parsing might prove the parsing is cheap enough. We might just do it. That would be pretty cool. CommonJS modules won't go away. Those 700,000 modules won't go away. You'll still use them, but the ones you use a lot will move forward to ESM. You'll just use fewer things that say require in them. And export modules.export equals boo. You'll just start using ESM modules. Those you'll be probably downloading trillions per week. That will be very exciting, but for me anyway, and I have my scaling problems, but there'll be ESM, you'll do it. Eventually browsers are gonna have a loader spec. They're working on it now. Eventually Node will support it all natively and it will make sense and you will use it. Eventually you'll stop typing require. This talk can only happen at this moment in time, I think. Well, okay, Miles gave one last year that was kind of like this. But eventually we'll stop giving talks like this saying, oh my God, it's not worked out yet. Eventually, next year, maybe 2 years from now, I'll come up here and I'll say, hey, we did it at last. And you'll say, CJ, this is boring. We've been doing it for a year. Go away, which would be beautiful. That would be what I'd actually want. Future of modules is ESM, and it's actually gonna be just fine. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.